Welcome to the Not Superheroes Gets Dads podcast. No, we can't fly. No, we can't shoot lasers or pick up giant buildings. But what we can do is help set the foundations for our families, be present for our kids, and combat generational cycles. On this podcast, we dive into everything dad related, from the struggles we deal with as fathers to what our favorite thing to barbecue is. Hello, I'm Sean Laurie. I hope you guys are doing great. Hopefully, you had a blessed day, blessed weekend. Like always, make sure you like, subscribe, share, tell a friend. It's actually funny. Someone on the last episode, someone asked me if I was being sponsored by Smoothie King because I was drinking it last time. I am not, but if anyone knows any sponsors, throw them my way for sure. but um, but with that being said, guys, I have an amazing guest. He's a father, he's a son, he's a husband. He's the best barber in San Antonio in my eyes. My boy Phabe. How you doing, man?
What's good? What's good? Just chilling, man. Just here with you. You know what I'm saying?
Appreciate that. So, what I like to do, man, I like to do, a icebreaker all the time. So, my icebreaker for you, bro, is obviously I mentioned, you are a barber. So, what is because you are also from New York. So, what would you say is the biggest, I guess, culture difference, or what you notice different between the barbers out here, or the barbershop culture out here compared to the barbershop culture in New York?
Well, I just feel like just overall, the culture's just changed
Mm,
because just period. Because I think with the advent of social media, like a lot of the trends that were just once upon a time just regional are worldwide. So I think that it has changed the game a lot. Especially the last, I'd say, 6 to 10 years for sure.
yeah,
Social media and all of that, like, people combining skills across the country, across the world,
mm,
and you see a lot of trends that might start out somewhere in, it could be India or something. Dudes been doing it in UK, Brazil, like, you might learn something from somebody in Hawaii, you know?
true.
So the game's changed a lot because of that,
Mm,
So I think if anything, the barbers are more sophisticated, they're smarter, as far as like techniques and just they got a YouTube University. You know what I'm
yeah,
saying? There really is no excuse, really, to have a whack haircut. I feel, you know what I'm saying? Like this
mm,
day and age,
true.
you know.
No, that's
So
real. That's real, man. So, how did what I guess what even sparked you, bro, to even get into it? Was it something like you was just really passionate about, or something, you thought of, or was it something you just always did, in New York, or did before or did when you moved out to San Antonio? Like, what actually got you into that field?
well, it was I just basically didn't want to wait for my mom to get me a haircut. You know what I'm saying? So you always had to know that you always got the spare pair of clippers, from
Yeah.
like I guess back then it would be Woolworth or like you know, the old school stores, whatever, and we would just have them in the house, the walls or whatever, and I would just, at first use them just to like edge up myself after I got a
Yeah.
haircut when it would start looking busted, and then after a while, just kept practicing, and then, you start to get compliments, and you're like, man, who cut your hair? I was like, I did, By that time, I think I was only like 13, you know.
Dang.
13, 14, already cutting like my friends in the neighborhood and stuff. And I had a
Dang.
lot of older guys I knew on the block, you know, like Jancy, Curtis, and a few others that, they inspired me. They were just a couple years older than me, but, some
Mm,
of them were already cutting in barbershops, so I'll go check them, at work, hang out with them and, see what they do. And of course that was inspiring, especially back then because, the barbershop definitely was a community thing, you know.
yeah.
And this is circa, early 90s, so yeah, early 90s going into, yeah, straight into high school and all that, in mid 90s and whatnot. I was cutting hair that whole time, but I always thought of it as something that I would do, just for fun, just to, a
Yeah.
little side money, but I never saw myself doing it for a living though. I really
Mm.
didn't. I wanted to go to college and, you know, play Eddie Murphy and Boomerang, so to speak. You know what I'm saying? Be all extra fresh, got the cufflinks and the dope Mont Blanc pens and all that, and that's what I was shooting for. That business world,
Yeah,
finance world, and yeah, just the way things are sometimes. Just you try certain things out, and then you end up where you are. But
yeah.
I'm not complaining because I did very well. It wasn't what I planned, but God is good, so it worked out.
That's dope, man. That's what I was wondering, right? Because like you say, you're like I said, amazing barber. Shout out to you. Y'all definitely check him out. But as far as
Appreciate it.
what because you moved from New York to San Antonio. So, people might be listening. It's like, man, isn't there way more money in New York? Couldn't you, obviously, like you said, you're not complaining. You're doing well for yourself. But what I guess got you to move out of New York to San Antonio, where it's like, man, everyone's looking at like fast pace. Everyone's trying to get their money up, things like that, especially in New York. So, what got you to go from New York to now San Antonio? You've been out here for a
Basically, I
while, of
had moved
course.
out here. Yeah, I came out here in 2010. My last daughter, she was born out here. Testament to
Mm.
that. She's my Texas baby. But yeah, I moved out here with my ex-wife basically,
Mm,
and things didn't plan out the way the way we would have wanted it to. At least you know what I'm saying. And but I decided to stay despite everything. I really felt like it was just a better place for the children. More
mm,
opportunity. I felt like just doing the math. I sat down and, did the spreadsheet, checked out the local cities, weighed my options, whether or not I wanted to move back to New York after everything. But I was like, nah, like, this is better, for the kids. Your money stretches, no income tax, and cost of living's cheaper. Even though the cost of living's going up, it's still cheaper than every other major city that we're in the same category with as far as population and growth and all the metrics that really matter. San Antonio is still one of the cheapest cities to be in, but still have all the opportunity. I tell people
mm,
all the time that I'd rather make a half a million in San Antonio than a million in New York by far. You know what I'm saying? I'd take a half a million in Texas any day over a million in some place like LA or like a Chicago or even Houston. You know what I mean?
yeah.
Some cities is like, to each his own, but I feel like I've outgrown that. When you have kids, it's cool when you're single and you're young, but when you have kids and of course your life got to be directed around them, you know, it
Mm,
changes the way you see, everything. Understanding that your zip code dictates their future, dictates who they're going to be friends with, the type of people they're going to be friends with, the type of
mm,
environment they're going to be in. It helps a lot, just zip code and, proximity to great schools and all the stuff that should matter, as a
yeah.
father. So I just took all that into consideration and said, I'm just going to stay here and,
That's
haven't
real.
regretted it, not at all.
That's
I
dope,
like
bro.
it.
No, that's real, man. That's why I actually, you segue to my next question. I was gonna ask you, you being a girl dad, now that's the term and all, right? So how has that, I guess, shaped your outlook in life? Because I know for me, having my two girls, they helped, I guess, soften me a little bit, where I'm not as rough a little bit. I'm like, okay, I got to open up a
Yeah.
little bit more, um, and because we'll try with our wives or our girlfriends, but I don't know. It's like something about our daughters where we're like, we really have to really try to, open up a little bit more. They like force it out of us. So like, how has
Yeah.
that shaped you?
It's true, obviously you understand, hopefully you understand very quickly as a parent period that, your kids are going to be who you are. You're their superhero, you're their first example of everything, for better and for worse. They see us and, you know, we're second to God as we should be in their eyes. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
We're perfect to them. We're everything. Even when we're bad, we're still perfect to them to where they'll even grow up and emulate our bad behaviors too. So
Mm,
just taking that into consideration first and foremost, and especially being a girl dad, knowing that one day, God willing, I'm gonna be passing them on to somebody hopefully just as responsible as me to take care of them and for them to take care of as well.
mm,
That it's my responsibility to make sure that I give them the best example of, what a man should be, like how they should be treated, you know. So that, you know, it still plays with boys too, though, you know, because we're showing them how to handle situations and at the same time how to be good husbands. You know,
Yeah.
how you should treat your wife, how you should treat your daughters, how you should treat your women, and you know, your sons seeing how you treat their female siblings and how you treat their mom plays into that too. You know, I definitely feel that. Even though I never raised sons, you know, I've definitely had a lot of, you know, long relationships with, you know, young men and stuff to
Yeah.
understand a lot about, you know, the dynamics and of course myself, you know what I'm saying, being a young man once upon a time and understanding that it makes a big difference. Just having that role model and just being there for them and just, yeah,
Yeah.
just always understanding that they're watching, you know, and definitely, you know, especially with girl children, you know, being able to apologize
Mm.
and be able to say, hey, I'm sorry, you know, when you do overreact as a father and you because they're more sensitive, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And rightfully so. So it definitely makes you softer in that aspect. And of course, it puts you in check and makes you be more empathetic
Yeah.
to the needs of others, you know, having, the, you know, raising daughters, just the way they operate, you know. You got to learn to
Yeah.
read them not without their words. You know, that skill definitely passes on. It's definitely
Yeah.
a life skill that passes on to everything. You know, it definitely helps a lot. You know, it
No,
helped me in that aspect. Learn a
yeah,
lot.
that's what you saying is true. Like being able to read even when they don't say it, read their body language and stuff. So
You know?
that's key for sure, man.
You know,
So then,
and it plays into the everyday. You know,
yeah,
with the adults we're around. You know, it helps you.
mm,
It helps you to see them. You know, because you think of yourself. Like I said, you put yourself in their shoes and what's wrong. You know how you be like, "What's wrong, babe?" Like nothing. You don't want to talk and all that, and you got to draw it out of them. You know, but you know, with love and perseverance, you get them, you get them.
yeah, yeah. No, that's true, bro. So how do you then how do you balance, being a full time barber and being a present father? And the reason why I ask that because I know a lot of times for barbers, those that's really doing it right, it's like they're basically, you know, working 6 days a week, 7 days a week, or they're from early morning to 8 o'clock at night or whatever. Like how have you been able to be the father that you are with your girls and obviously be there for your lady and things like that? Like how have you been able to balance that, or has it been difficult at times?
It's definitely it was difficult at first. You know,
Mm,
until you know I met my wife. You know, shout out to her. You know, my current wife, Fumeza. And it definitely was difficult at first because obviously, you know, you're dealing with separation, you know, and then of course the kids are dealing with separation as well.
mm,
And, you know, but you still got to move on. You still got to take them to school. You still got to move on. You know, you can't give up. You can't stop. So I just had to thank God, you know, I was a barber because I was able to adjust my schedule as
yeah,
necessary to make sure that I could still take them to track and, you know, still take them to practice and still try to do things with them. But it definitely was difficult, you know. It wasn't easy
mm,
for sure. But, you know, still day by day got better and better, you know. And definitely, you know, just having, you know, a help me, as we call them, you know, because we got to help them too. But just having that help where it's balanced. You know, my wife's being a wife, you know, and I'm being a husband. So it allows me more leeway to
mm,
go and make the bacon, and then you know she's able to cook the bacon and everything in between. You know what I'm saying, and just make it work. You know, nobody trying to be selfish in the situation, and it helps a lot. The teamwork, you know, just a husband and wife teamwork, because it's definitely harder, obviously, when you're just by yourself. You know, and then of course four
yeah,
girls. You know, it wasn't. Yeah, it wasn't easy. I ain't gonna. I'd be lying if I said it was. But you know, we made it through. You know what I'm saying? Were there things I could have
yeah,
did better? Yeah, but I didn't know no better either. You know, how many times does a person go through this in life? To like, oh, I got this. You know, you think you got it, but I definitely wasn't that one to think I had it. I was like, oh man, it's hard, but I couldn't quit. You know what I'm saying? I
yeah,
couldn't quit, so just kept pushing it year by year. You know, day by day, week by week, year by year, just pushed through. And things
mm,
got better along the line. Me just more reps, basically, more practice. And then of course just trying to align myself mentally for the task at hand. Because instead of me feeling sorry for myself, I had to make sure that I was strong for them. Like I
mm,
said, because they're seeing me how I react and how I deal with situations, and shout out to that I see that in them sometimes, that they got so much of me in them that when they should ask for help, they don't. And I
mm,
gotta constantly remind them, hey, you still got me, like, you still got, your bonus mom, your real mom, like, you still got help, like, ask for help. You don't know it
yeah,
all, and just being
mm,
able to explain that to them, and just see that in them, which is me,
mm,
but me being able to pour that knowledge into them instead of them just, making those same mistakes that I made, that we made, that's priceless. But it gets, like I said, it gets hard sometimes, but you learn as you go, and
yeah,
you want to learn as you go, and just try to be a better father, a better friend, a better parent, all that. So it wasn't easy, but I definitely learned as I went along, and even repented of my ways, because sometimes, you look back on things you did and you be like, damn, I could have handled that better. At least I hope we do. You know what I mean?
mm,
I know I
yeah,
try to, like, at least reflect, do a rewind of the tape at the end of the day and get that play by play. And sometimes, oh, that was a dick move. Like, oh, well, yeah, that was actually good. I could have did that better. Or I could have, and I do that play by play for my rewind my days, and especially dealing with the kids and stuff, and you realize, okay, what I could have did better, where I messed up at, and where I scored a touchdown. So it's just
mm,
cool. Just a lot of reps, man, like, and it don't stop. Obviously, here we are. We
yeah.
both, what I'm saying. It's not going to stop no time soon either. You
No,
know.
no, man, it's not, and I'm more so just impressed because you're outnumbered. You know, what I mean, it's all girls, so you
Yeah.
can you dealing with all different types of emotions, different personalities. I mean, you would anyways, even if you had boys, but just all those different things. And
Yeah.
so you said something too that stuck out to me. Like you said, obviously you have girls, but different guys and different things like that. I was going to ask you because being a barber, right, it's almost like at times it's like a therapy session, right? Like, you just kind of hair, but they're venting or they're going through whatever. And so I was going to ask you, like, has there ever been a time where, you're cutting someone's hair or whatever, and you kind of saw like the progression from maybe something that you helped them with, right? um, Maybe something they're dealing with, and you're able to kind of pour into whatever young man, and they come back and they're like, "Man, I appreciate you for sharing that with me." Or, "Man, you was right. You helped me in this situation."
Yeah, I definitely feel blessed that I'm able to do that, because I always said to myself when I was going through stuff that, I had nobody, pretty much to help me get through it, that
Mm,
could understand where I was
mm,
going through and understand where I was coming from, because it's different when you got people who got sympathy, and then
yeah,
you got people who have sympathy and understanding and solutions, and I didn't want to be somebody who did not have solutions. I always promised myself that. And that's something that I poured into myself to help me heal, to help me become a better man for myself and my children. When going through that turmoil helps you to recognize where you're weak and where you need to be stronger. We hope so. We hope
yeah,
so. Because apparently, obviously, it don't work that way for everybody. But you know, thank God it worked that way for me. That I actually put in the effort. I was able to pull the results out, and what I was able to learn to help myself heal and become stronger for my, myself first and foremost, and then my family, the outpouring which comes from that, and to be able to do that for others, I thank God for that, because to me it's
yeah,
like a testimony of the power of knowledge, the testimony of the power of our, our words, and how we can literally with our words program each other for better and for
mm,
worse. That's why even the scriptures say we gotta be careful with our words, and just understanding that we could literally use what was poured into me, all the knowledge, and I could regurgitate that back into someone else and help them to come out of a rut or come out of a situation way faster. So it's like we're programming each other, we're helping each other. And I always said that, I don't want to just be, you know, complaining, and you just complain, but you leave and there's no solution, or
mm,
there's nothing to fix it. And that's something that I just always promise myself I'll never be that way. And if I ever see somebody I know that, they're going through something and I know I have a answer to that, I'm going to give them the answer, and they could hate me or they could thank me later. But, I remember all the times that even when I didn't want to hear it, that somebody gave me a good word, some good knowledge. And even at that moment, I might not have accepted it, but I still remembered it. I still remember who said it. I still remember why they said it. And even though it might have took me even a year, 2, 3, 4, 5 years to understand what they were telling me, I was more thankful to that person that told me the cold hard truth than the people who kind of danced around it and never really gave me a solution and, just kind of willy, just never helped. You know what I'm saying? So I always said that I want to be able to help people, at least in that one way. You know what I mean? And I'm thankful that I am able to do that because, I mean, oftentimes, like, I don't even solicit that. It just comes out,
Mm,
we'll be talking and just somehow, some way, the only thing I can thank is God for that is that we'll be talking and somehow it will segue. We could start off talking about Doberman pinchers. And, next thing you know, we're talking about a problem this dude's having at work or, somebody might
mm,
have an issue, with their car or their, a friend or whatever the case may be. And just, it's really cool to actually, not only be asked that, but sometimes actually have a real solution for it. Sometimes it even trips me out. I'm like, damn, like I actually
mm.
got an answer for that. So I'm like, thank you, God. Like to me, it's a testimony of God. It's a testimony
Yeah.
that, you know, that word which was given you in a package can be passed on to another individual and work for them too. It's like Microsoft Word, you know what I'm saying? And you
Yeah.
put it in any computer, it's gonna work. You
Yeah.
take this bit of knowledge, you put it over here, it works. You put it here, it works. It works everywhere unless you get a virus. And other than that, yeah, we get viruses too and glitches too. But for the most part, it's beautiful to see that. Like, wow, what worked for me works for this person too. And there's so many things that are like that, physically, spiritually, and even mentally, you know what I'm saying, emotionally, that you could pass on to others and help them in a time of need. Same way somebody was able to do that for me, and just like pass it forward. So that's like a philosophy that I definitely live by, because I feel like it's just only right. Because like I said, I didn't like it. I
Mm,
definitely didn't like it when people withheld information.
yeah.
And then later on, it's like, man, I knew that, man. I saw that, man. It's like, so why'd you tell me something? Why didn't you let me know? Like, you saw some wolves around the corner, man. Man, I thought you might have saw it, so I just let it go. Like, I didn't feel like I had to tell you. I'm like, bro, like, there's wolves around the corner. You gonna let me know? Well, I
Yeah.
thought I didn't want to scare you, and people be like that. Be like,
No, that's
no,
true.
I'd rather be scared. Like, I'd rather you tell me and be scared and be prepared than I just hit the corner and like, oh, wolves, oh shit, like, and
Yeah.
I was like, I
No.
can't do that to people. You
Yeah.
know, nobody deserves to be blindsided. You know what I mean? Especially if you have solutions and facts that could actually help them. That's just the way
Mm,
I am. Like I said, I don't think I'll ever change that, even to my own detriment. Because
mm,
sometimes telling people that hard truth, you could piss them off. You could even scare them away. But the thing that I've learned in my years on this planet is, if you're speaking right and you're speaking righteously about a subject and you're speaking from the heart and you're speaking the truth, they'll be mad for now, but they always come back. You give
true.
it enough time, they come back. It may not be the way you might not even get to see it, but they come back. You know what I mean? It'll hit one day, and I'm thankful for that. You know,
No, that's
so
true, bro. I want to ask you then, because like you say, you have these conversations with different people, come across different walks of life and things like that. Like, is there maybe one memorable moment that you can maybe share? Like, maybe it was just like a conversation that turned to a real life inspiration, either for them or for yourself, or something where they said something where you're like, man, actually, what they said, I actually want to make this change in this area. Like, it could have been in anything. It could have been investing. It could have been in doing something for your house or whatever the case is. Like, was there something that was said either by you or by them, or just a conversation that really inspired you?
um, I had a customer that was cutting his hair for quite a few years, and typical guy, normal, normal guy. You know what I'm saying? Ups and downs, baby mama drama, all the ups and downs that we, sometimes more oftentimes put ourselves through
Yeah.
than actually it be done to us. Even though sometimes we kind of like put ourselves down and make it feel like the world's against us. Like, but in that one situation with this young man, I actually, just knowing him for a while and just being frank with him, I was like, bro, like, I love you, but that's your fault, man. You
Mm,
gotta take ownership of it. Like, you really have to take ownership and understand, like, it's you, and just at the same time, you know tying in scripture with it, and just
mm,
tying in, like, the many lessons about manhood and about life, and you know what we're supposed to do in this world, and being able to tie that into what we're dealing with in modern times, why certain traditions and things we've gotten away with has actually caused us to have the downfall of so many things on this side, because we're basically out of balance, and just being able to show him and tie it together, like, man, we gotta give thanks. There's more than just this, and it seemed like every time we would talk, it seemed like he was getting better and better. I ended up, because I have a thing where, like, I like to buy like Bibles in bulk,
mhm.
and I just give them away. You know what I'm saying? When
Wow.
the chance presents itself, and you'd be surprised how many people don't have a Bible. You know what I mean? You'd be surprised. I
Wow.
mean, a lot of people don't read period nowadays unless it's on their phone. But you know, even to read the Bible on your phone, it's still nice to have a nice physical copy
Yeah.
of it. That you can thumb through, and it smells like paper, and you can use it without electricity. And I just will give that. I remember giving it to him,
Mm,
and I ended up not seeing him for a while, but I was still cutting, his son's hair. His son would still come through. Him and the mother weren't together anymore, but I still would cut the son. And some years had passed. You know what I'm saying? And I haven't heard from him. You know what I mean? But I remember he called me one day. He just hit me up and said, "Oh man, I haven't heard from you." I was like, "What's up? What's going on?" He's like, "No, nothing, man. It's just, hey man, I just wanted to let you know that what I'm saying, you one of the people that actually told me the truth and actually explained things about God and myself better than probably most people ever have for me. I just wanted to thank you for that. But I was just like taken aback, like, oh, well, I didn't really do nothing, but just tell you my story, my testimony. So salute to you. I hope
mm.
I hope you're doing good. You know what I'm saying? And that was literally like years later. You know what I'm saying? And then I remember one time, the mother came in with the son, like she usually does, and I haven't seen him like a while. You know what I'm saying? I'm like, hey, what happened to so and so? And she's like, huh? Like, oh man, like he died. I was like, what? And
Wow.
turns out he was young too, man. Like, you
Mm,
know, um, I think he was probably like late 30s the most, man, mid to late 30s. He was
wow.
young, and he ended up dying of cancer. I can't remember which one in
Wow.
particular, but shocked me. But talking to her and her telling me the timeline of everything, he basically hit me up when he was based, on his last days, so
Wow.
I didn't even know that. You know what I'm saying? So
Yeah.
it'd be stuff like that happens sometimes that'll trip you out. And you're just like, wow,
That's
like,
powerful.
you know,
Jeez.
yeah, it was like, it's weird, but I don't take credit for that stuff though. Like,
Yeah. Yeah.
it feels weird because like, I'm just me. I'm just, like I said, I just want to just do my part. You know what I mean? Like I said,
Mm,
just help those because I know what it's like when I needed help. You know what I
yeah.
mean? And I can't wear a cape and build suits like Iron Man, but I figure like that's one way I could help. Help those
Mm,
around me. Pour out what God gives me that I
yeah.
feel like God lets me overflow with, that I could take care of myself. I could take care of my wife. I could take care of my
Mm,
kids, and my bonus daughters as well, and my dogs, and my house, and all the other things that God blessed me to have providence over. And it does
yeah.
overflow to where I can give out even further into the world. And I thank God for that. You know what I mean? I don't take no credit for it. I feel like as long as I get up and do what I was supposed to do and treat people the way I want to be treated, that God will continue to bless me with the knowledge and wisdom and the discernment to get through these times and these days. And I just give it up to God for all of it. You
Yeah.
know, it definitely helps to be the type of person that takes those lessons seriously,
Mm,
and understands what we're here to do, and I feel like that's where a lot of us fail at, not on purpose. It's just not understanding what we're here for. And of course, if you feel like you don't have a purpose, then what are you living for? And that's a whole
Mm,
other cascade of thoughts that could take you down a rabbit hole of despair. You know what I'm
yeah,
saying? But
yeah. So then,
it's just
who?
crazy.
I'm curious, just because obviously, as I've gotten to know you over time, you're super knowledgeable. You're a real, you're very logical. You're thinking as well, and so, you put your best foot forward in everything you do. Where did that come from, though? Like, who helped you become the man that you are today, right? What was it, you know, I don't know, family, I don't know, a situation with your pops, or was it, your uncles, or just, I know obviously, like you said, you made those mistakes. We all make mistakes, of course, but like, um, who has helped you get to where you're at now, right? Besides obviously just going through life, but who could you point out to? Maybe it's when you was younger, where you like, dang, because I know, like for me, I talked about this before. Me and my dad are better now, but I didn't see him like that. So I know, like Uncle Phil, right? Uncle Phil from Will Smith was a big inspiration for me. You know, so, and then obviously I had like my homies that had kids and stuff like that. So I watch how they move and stuff. But for you, bro, who was like your inspiration growing up, if at all?
Um, for sure, my mom, because she
Mm,
raised us, me and my sister pretty much, on her own.
mm,
We had family help, of course, friend help, the usual, you got your group,
yeah.
growing up, the neighborhood group and the extended family and friends and stuff. And of course, my cousins, my aunts, you know what I'm saying? And they all helped, you know what I mean, to help me to become.
Mm,
But like all of it, is, and if anything, I could say my dad too. Because, like my mom showed me so eloquently, like one day I was so pissed and she told me, like, yeah, don't be like him. And I
mm,
learned a lot from that. It's like, yeah,
mm,
you may not, know what to do, but at least you know what not to do. And it's
mm,
true because, I made it a point to not do the things he did and not be the way he was, but at the same time, it still was a lapse of education because I still did not know what to be and how to be it. Because it's different when you have a father, because you can have a father, but you can have a father that doesn't teach you. You can have a father who's absent. So you can have a father who's abusive. So you can still have a father and still not learn. You can have a father
mm,
who's just he's there in the house and everything, but he just don't interact with you. You got all these different scenarios. You know what I'm saying? So even just having a father is not everything.
mm,
But just having a father figure, a man in your life, a man who could teach you how to be a man. And I could say like a lot of men in my life took on that responsibility. You
mm,
know, a lot of teachers that took me under their wing over the years that, didn't have to, male and female of all persuasions and colors and you name it, just growing up in the Bronx, a melting pot. So,
mm,
I definitely grew up not seeing race like most people kind of end up seeing race because I just saw everything and they were just like my brothers and sisters. These were my classmates. These are my
mm,
homies from the block. And just coming up in that environment, you know, big homies and friends, and it was just a little bit of everything. Some of these friends were younger than me, but because they might have had like a few more big brothers than me, or they had a very active dad in their life. I got a lot of secondhand knowledge from them. You know what I'm
yeah.
saying? That their dad gave them and they gave me. Because of the community. So it's a combination
Mm,
of everything, and it's also, I think, more than anything, is the ability to take the knowledge that you're given and actually put it into action, actually use it, actually do
mm,
something with it. And I feel like we all have access to knowledge, we all have access to wisdom to grow and be better. But I definitely feel like it's a personality thing for people to want to achieve more and grow and want to learn and want to be better. and I've reached a point in my life where I just see it as such. Like you either have it or you don't. Because you know you could look at like you said, the Fresh Prince. Think about all the different personalities in that house,
Yeah.
but they were all the same mother and father, all the same rules, the same water, the same food, the same butler, the same dog, but you'll get four different personalities out the same household. You'll get
Mm,
one that's going to be the super jock. You're going to get one that just loves to read and knit. You know what I mean? You're going to get one that just likes to, just be a womanizer, just go chase and flirt. And you'll have, another brother who just likes to, just drink, just
yeah.
smoke, just whatever, just say play video games all day. But they all come from the same house, and we grew up in the situations like that. So I don't know. I just attribute it, to personal. Somebody wanted to personally get it, personally want to grow, want to be better. Kind of like yourself.
Yeah.
You wanting to grow, you wanted to be better. You
Yeah.
want to learn. You want to grow. And I feel like that's something that you have to have. That's something
Yeah.
that you have to want. I don't think everybody want it. And, the math shows me that. The world shows me that. Not everybody want it. But shout out to those that do. You know what I'm saying?
Now I was gonna ask you then, do you think because you said growing up in Bronx, you know, I'm sure certain parts of the Bronx, you gotta be on your toes. Do you think it was one of those situations too? They didn't have, the people you knew, they didn't have maybe those type of people that you had looking out for you. They didn't. So this is what they knew. So they're like, hey, I'm a grind. I'm gonna be out here like I'm Jay-Z or something. What I mean? I'm trying to get to this money. This is the only lane I kind of know. So I'm just gonna go here. Like how I guess I should ask, how were you able to avoid that? And then were you able to maybe help some of your people that you knew from New York and be like, hey, like come over here. Like there's more than what you're seeing on this side. Like let me show you some over here.
Because even that, I feel is a personal choice. I feel
Mm,
that some people are blessed with an ability to see a little further than others, or maybe listen to their to their angel, to their sixth sense, whatever you want to call it, because it's for you to be able to look beyond the place you were born and the place you grow up, and to see a future that you haven't tasted, you haven't touched it, you haven't
mm,
smelled it, but you know it exists, and you're looking for it, and you're actively looking for it, and you're
yeah.
looking for it in the stories of others. You're looking for it from your uncle that went to the Air Force. You're gonna ask him. You're looking for it on National Geographic. You're looking, and I feel
Mm,
like you gotta want it. You really honestly have to want that future. You gotta want that
yeah.
thing which you want to be able to get up out of there. So
Mm,
for some people though, them wanting to get out, they could be extremely intelligent, have the wit, the charm, the IQ, the EQ, they can have everything. But because of their ignorance and lack of knowledge, they choose, you know, drug dealing. They choose, whatever, prostitution. They choose crime. They choose, scamming. Because like you said, that's all they know. And it's the lack of exposure to certain things, and because even with me wanting to go to college and wanting to do more and have more, and it was because of exposure, the programs that I was in, like where we would go out like once a month and go camping way up north in upstate New York, the Create program I was in, and a few other things, that was in junior high school 80, and there's a lot of stuff, man. Even in high school, just having certain teachers, you know, at Randolph, just, you know, they don't have to, but they took me under their wing. They just
mm,
saw something in me that they, and they said, Phabe, we're going to show you more. And they did. They put me into certain programs and around certain people that exposed me to different lifestyles and exposed me to different points of view that I probably would not have gotten, if I would have
mm,
stayed where I was. Because it's just like any hood you go to, you tend to notice that your friends end up doing the same thing that their friends are doing because that's the only thing that seems obtainable because you see that's what your friends are doing.
mm.
He's doing good doing it. I'm gonna try that too, and that's for better and for worse. You know, so it just
True.
thankful that I was able to see some stuff, and travel a bit, and yeah, just blessed, man. This is like the perfect combination of things that just came together that you can't plan as a young man. You just,
Yeah. Yeah.
you can't pick your parents, you can't pick your zip code, you can't pick your middle school, you don't pick your height, you don't pick none of that, and the people who are going to be around you and what teachers are going to happen to be in your life, what class you get put into. I have no control over that.
Yeah.
So just, I feel definitely blessed, to have, despite not having the father figure I wished I would have had, I definitely had a lot of people. It's still not the same as being there, and actually being their biological father and being there all the time. You're never going to get that full father figure play. So there's still going to be lapses in the knowledge, which I've learned later on. There's still going to be lapses in the wisdom, but for the most part, it helps a lot. Definitely helped a
Yeah.
lot. You know, even after you did mess up, to have somebody pull you in, like, hey man, what you doing?
Yeah.
What was you thinking? Like, why'd you go down? Why'd you do that? And make you think, make you
Yeah.
even go through your own action. Like, damn, he's right. Like, I didn't think of it like that because I'm too young and
Yeah.
dumb to think of it like that. And get somebody to help me think. 2 minutes past midnight. 'Cause I'm only thinking about right now. This is gonna be great. Then I'm like, wait a minute, I didn't think that far ahead. Yeah, that's why you're here right now. Like, so learning from that. So
Bro.
definitely some experiences help that.
So I want, as we close out, I have just two questions for you. So my first question is, um, what is what would you, if you could tell your younger self anything, what would you tell your younger self?
I think the most important thing I would tell my younger self is tomorrow will come, and to plan for it and be that person that you want to be tomorrow. I got to start being that person today so that my
Mm,
future self could thank my past self. Because I
mm,
feel so often, with so many things in life, is patience and time in the game, and that time in the game and that patience helps you to prepare for that future. But it's kind of like when a kid will be like, I don't want to go to college because it's going to take too long. That's 4 years, that's forever. Because they don't think that they're going to be there. They don't realize they're saying that, but they're talking like they're not going to be there in 4 years. That
mm,
they're going to die soon, and that I got to have fun now because that's such a long time and anything can happen. They're saying that without saying that. Whereas, the intelligent person is going to be like, well, I'm going to live till 80, 90 if I take care of myself, eat right, take my vitamins, exercise, drink my water. What's 4 years? Man, while I'm at it, let me invest some money, because
mm,
this market seems like it's going to just go up. While I'm at it, I might as well, stack some money. And while I'm at it, let me read these books so I can become more valuable to myself and others and know that I will be here to reap the benefits of what I'm sowing right now and not be so short sighted. That's like that plays on so many things, just to have that patience to be like, hey, you're gonna be here. You know what I'm saying? You're gonna be here. So you might as well get ready for it, and
mm.
not just live for today, not just live for, next week when we go to Miami, but look way further, like when we come back and we broke and like how we gonna pay this electric bill? Like, you know what I'm saying? Just
That's
the
real.
dumb stuff of the past and just understand you're gonna be here. So
Yeah.
that's for better and for worse. You're gonna be here.
Yeah.
So, even when you act up, right? You know, you act up now and get yourself into an altercation and then know, like, hey, guess what? It's not over yet. You're going to be here. You know what I'm saying? Now you on first 48. You know what I'm saying? You thought it was over yesterday when you did what you did. No, now it ain't over. They still coming.
Yeah.
So just knowing to think past the moment. Think
Mm,
past even next year and the year after. Like, in 10 years, I want this. What am I going to do to get to that in 10 years?
yeah.
And then put that into action today. That's what I
Mm,
definitely would tell myself. If
I like
myself would listen. Hopefully I would.
I like that, bro. So to close it out, I guess it's a two-part question, but what is three words that you feel like your girls would say to describe you, you know? And then with that, what do you hope, you know, when you're long and gone, when you're 95 years old, and then you you pass away or whatever it is, like what is something you hope that your daughters learn or value, or something you instilled in them? What do you hope that they always take with them?
To never stop learning and never stop working,
Mm,
because if in the scriptures it says that earth is an image of heaven. You know what I'm saying? Like everything that's on earth is in heaven.
mm,
So I feel like even when we go to heaven, which has been also demonstrated in scriptures, we still gonna have jobs to do. We still gonna be working. I don't think we're gonna be sitting back, getting our fat bellies rubbed and just chilling and drinking wine and just floating around. Like there might be time for that. I'm sure we get vacation days. You know what I'm saying? But I feel like it's gonna be straight work from here on out. God doesn't stop working. His angels don't stop working. Jesus still took breaks too, but for the most part, he was still working. You know what I
yeah,
mean? He was taking breaks in between traveling from, Jerusalem to Galilee and all that. And why should
yeah,
I stop? You know what I mean?
yeah,
And then also to know that as long as I put one foot in front of the other, that next step is guaranteed.
mm,
As long as I put one foot in front of the other, if I don't walk forward, I'm never going to get there. And I know that that's one thing I want my kids to always remember is just don't stop working and don't stop learning. And those two things combined, you should have a very healthy and just prosperous life. That's
yeah.
my belief. It's for
I like
sure.
that, bro. No, I like that for sure, man. And so, as we get ready to close out, well, what one, let them know where you're, for those that are in San Antonio, they're like, man, yeah, I definitely want to be, I definitely want him to give me a cut and all this stuff and be able to share some of this knowledge, man. Where can they, find you at? Where can they, contact you or whatever?
Definitely on IG. It's barber Phabe, the barber underscore Phabe. Phabe. And I'm also on I have my booking link and everything on there, and you can also find me on Booksy and
Mm.
210barber.com is the easiest way because that'll
Mhm.
link you to everything.
Awesome, man. No, I love it, man. Again, man, I appreciate you hopping on. I appreciate you, bro, just for you being who you are. You're definitely
Thank you.
being the example, man, for your family. And like you said, man, your girls is looking at you because at the end of the day, you're the only male figure in the house. You know what I mean? So they're watching everything you do, man. And so you just keep holding the standard, bro. What you've been doing, man, I appreciate you. And even you know how with my youngest, you got him to get comfortable and stuff like that, where he don't vibe with everybody, and he be knowing like, oh yeah, we gonna go see Babe, okay, so
Yeah,
he be all excited, man. So I just thank you, bro, for being you, man, and I want to give you your flowers
appreciate you.
before we got off.
Thank you, man. Same to you, man. You know what I'm saying? Like we all need this fellowship. We all need this time to inspire each other because sometimes in the trenches you forget, like, sometimes you think you're the only one, but salute to you showing us, that we're not the only one in your
Yeah,
podcast and everything that you're doing. So thank you. You know what I'm saying?
yeah,
So,
appreciate it.
if I can help others out there, just like you help me and you help others and we all can help each other and just learn and
Yeah,
grow.
no, I appreciate it, man. And like guys, like always, you don't have to be perfect, but you always have to be present. I'll see you guys on the next one.